Coming up, DTVC Extra is back as we start our look at the Kickboxer franchise with Kickboxer 1 and Kickboxer 2. Next week, Ty from Comeuppance is back on as we look at Detective Knight Rogue. I'm trying to figure out which Detective Knight it was. It's the first one, Detective Knight Rogue. So we're starting that trilogy. So we look at that film with Bruce Willis in it. And then we also look at Chavez Cage of Glory. I should make sure I'm getting that title right. Hector Echeverria film from the mid-2010s. I think it's like 2013. So we look at that film. We'll also kind of look at that period of time there where Hector Echeverria was making these tap-out movies where he seemed to have like this huge cast of B-list actors like Patrick Kilpatrick and Robert Miano and James Russo and whoever, Stephen Bauer, just all these names that he could just pull from and make these movies. Kind of the way Nevsky is now, right? Where Nevsky's got like, Olivier Gruner and Matthias Hughes and whoever. And they're also both making vanity projects. So we kind of look at those films a little bit there. So that'll be good. It's good to get Ty back on. It's been a little bit since we've had him on. And so, yeah, we're going back into the Willis pool, the Willis pool, but then also looking at the Hector Echeverria film. Chavez, I keep wanting to call it Cesar Chavez, but it's Chavez Cage of Glory. Rocky ripoff. Interesting film that we'll be looking at. As far as the site goes, next up we're going to be looking at Mercenary, the Jesse V. Johnson film. And then I think the week after that we'll be looking at High Heat, which is a film that Will from Exploding Helicopter and I covered in our Olga Karolinko episode. So things are a little bit busy right now. You may have noticed that the blog post was a little late. It came on like Sunday night. Usually I try to get it in Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, but it was Sunday night, Eastern time, U.S. So work has gotten a little bit crazy now, so I've fallen behind on a little bit of stuff here, but hopefully going to get things caught up and maybe watch some new films, kind of mix those in with the films that are already listed on the letterbox there. And so again, look for Mercenary this week, and then next week High Heat. But I've talked about some others like VFW is one that I now have access to through AMC Plus. Hopefully we'll get that one reviewed soon because we need some more Fred Williamson. Plus, if you haven't heard, After Movie Diner did a really great John from After Movie Diner did a really great interview with William Sadler that's up on his podcast right now. Really should check that out. It was really great when it kind of inspired me to like get some William Sadler on the site, do VFW again. So, but yeah, really great conversation. I had to remind myself it was William Sadler because he was just so candid and just like talking about all kinds of subjects and everything. So yeah, if you're not subscribed to After Movie Diner, definitely check that one out. Yeah, so that is pretty much everything. Again, as always, go check out Letterboxd to see what movies we have on tap, what we're looking to be doing in the near future. I haven't been updating the Letterboxd lately either, so I just have been so outstrayed on everything. Normally, you get a chance to see. You can even on my site on DTV Connoisseur. There is an RSS feed. I always add an extra S there. RSS feed for what movies I've seen recently. I've kind of linked that to my diary on Letterboxd. So you can usually see what movies I've seen and maybe get a sense of what might be coming, whether it's on the site or on the podcast. So I haven't even been updating that. I got to go back and kind of update my diary on there. But yeah, Letterboxd is always a great way to kind of get a sense of what we've got cooking potentially. And then, of course, novels. We've got Holtman Arms, the most recent one, still out. Definitely give that one a look. Girl and a Gun, Chad and Accounting. I'm hoping pretty soon to get the next novel, Don's House in the Mountains, out. Probably, again, we're looking at August, but I haven't even been working on proofreading that yet. I've been so far behind. So I'm hoping to, maybe get back into proofreading that tonight because I definitely want to get that thing out as soon as I can and move on to the next stuff there. So, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. But anyway, right now we're going to get into some Kickboxers. So, speaking of John Cross from After Movie Diner, we'll listen to the theme song that he did for us, and then we will start with Kickboxer, the first Kickboxer. I was going to say Kickboxer 1, but we'll just call it the first Kickboxer with Jean-Claude Van Damme. All right, and we are back. And yeah, we're going to look at the Kickboxer franchise here. And so, after doing the Fast and Furious films, I was thinking about where I wanted to go next. And there was a sense of maybe like Mission Impossible, with the new Mission Impossible film coming out, that all of those are on Paramount Plus, so I could maybe check one of those out. I considered that. Obviously, with me having Disney Plus, I've got all the Marvel films. I was thinking maybe Marvel Phase 1. I have a few different ways I could go with that. And then I was like, as I was doing the Fast and Furious series, I thought, all the blockbuster talk and talking about, box office gross and how well this one did. It was a top 10 earner that year. Did it get over $1 billion? That kind of thing. It just didn't feel like the conversation I wanted to be having on the site, where we're talking about direct-to-video movies usually. I mean, it was fun to do it for a change of pace, but I kind of felt like, it's not really what we do here at the DTV Connoisseur. We're usually talking about things that are kind of a little bit the opposite end of the spectrum, right, from the Fast and Furious films. And who knows, maybe I'll come back to them because, recently I started playing this Match 3 game on my phone, the DC Heroes and Villains, which I've already been playing Marvel Puzzle Quest game on my phone. So just a little bit about me. I am a reformed video game addict. I was at one point with my PlayStation 2, I think it was. I don't know. I don't remember if I got the 3 or not, but I remember with the 2, I didn't necessarily hide it on myself, but I put it in a place where it was not easy to get to, just because I was wasting too much time playing video games. And when I say wasting, I mean like I was just, playing video games way too much. And with the Match 3 games on my phone, they're good time killers, but sometimes they can, get a little bit out of control. But anyway, with the DC one, it was interesting because I was kind of getting into DC. And was thinking about all the the DC, what is it, extended cinematic universe they call it, those movies, the Justice League movies, the Batman versus Superman, Wonder Woman, those kinds of films. There's another one, with HBO Max we've got all of those. So I was thinking, maybe I'll talk about those or something, and maybe sometime down the road, that could be an interesting conversation. I mean, even just sort of getting back into DC like that, because growing up, right, you had Superman, and then you had the Batman movie in '89. They're kind of these really high standards for what a comic book movie could be at that point. DC really didn't have like a Captain America, an Albert Pyun's Captain America, or Dolph's, Punisher. I mean, yeah, Superman 4 didn't do that well, but at least it was like a big theatrical thing, even though it was a flop. So it was interesting to think about like why I got away from DC in the early 90s. And there was really no explanation for it. It was like, okay, I grew up, Superman, Batman, was big fans of those. But when it came to collecting comics, I was always Marvel. And the only DC one that I really liked was Lobo at that time. He was the only one. I mean, occasionally I'd get like these variety packs of comics, and there'd be some DC ones in there, and I'd read them and enjoy them. But I never really sought DC out the way I did Marvel. And then when Image grew, right, when that whole crew from Marvel broke off and formed Image, suddenly like there wasn't even as much money for Marvel anymore, right? Because now I'm buying all these, luckily those guys at Image didn't do a great job, especially like Rob Liefeld. They did a great job of getting their books out on time, so I could, I could stretch my allowance a little bit further as a 12-year-old at that time. But and even Valiant, remember Valiant with like Magnus Robot Fighter and Turok Dinosaur Hunter. I mean, those were books at that time, and so DC really fell by the wayside. And of course, as you remember, Superman was killed, right? As DC's kind of gasped to try to regain a footing. And playing this video game and looking into it, I mean, one, there's like major villains like Vandal Savage is a villain I'd never heard of before, and he's a big deal villain. He's one that was invented, or had his first appearance in the 40s, and there wouldn't be a Marvel villain that I wouldn't have heard of, that like that level of baddie. So yeah, it's interesting kind of getting back into DC like that. And then that is one of those things, thinking like, okay, maybe I could, get into that. But anyway, kind of on that, getting off that DC tangent, I thought Kickboxer might be an interesting one to explore on here. I've reviewed all the Kickboxer films except for the first one that we'll be talking about in a second. So it's like a mix, right, of big screen and direct to video. So that's kind of a cool thing. Also, the franchise itself has taken some interesting turns, right? So you start with Van Damme, and then you've got 3 Sasha Mitchell-led films. Then you've got a Mark Dacascos one, which was just really kind of out there. And then you get those reboots, right, with Alain Moussi and Jean-Claude Van Damme kind of playing more of the mentor role, right? So I thought it would be a really interesting thing to look at, and could be kind of one that dovetails a little bit more with what we normally do on the site. People might be more interested in sort of hearing what I have to say about these Kickboxer films. So, and also again the fact that I haven't covered the first Kickboxer on the site, because again it was a big screen film, which I mean technically those two reboots were big screen as well. They just didn't do that well. But I always saw this one, Kickboxer, as something that was big screen enough that it really wasn't worthy for the site and wasn't something that I would want to cover on the site. So it's kind of cool to be able to chat about it now. So, getting into Kickboxer, the way I always see Kickboxer, the way I see Van Damme's career, I guess, is that, you have two films in the early 80s, right? Or, kind of mid 80s, late 80s, I'm saying, in his early career. But you've got the No Retreat, No Surrender, right? So that one, of course, where he plays a baddie, and then Black Eagle, right, where he plays a baddie. And, Black Eagle is listed as coming out around the same time as, the same year as Bloodsport. So there's kind of an overlap there, too, where he's got these two early films as a baddie, No Retreat, No Surrender, Black Eagle. And then you get these three, kind of rising star films, right? You've got Bloodsport, Cyborg, and Kickboxer. And you could even maybe put Lionheart in there too, as a little, again, maybe kind of like an overlap with Death Warrant, which Death Warrant was just, I remember that one being huge. And at that point, Van Damme was officially a star by the time Death Warrant comes out. And then you kind of, as the 90s go on, right, he continues to kind of grow that star, right? You get Double Impact, Universal Soldier. I mean, Universal Soldier, right? Of course, a huge one. Hard Target might be, the best of his movies, right? I think I may have had that as my number one. I know, Ty and Brett, when we did our top 5 Van Dammes, that was definitely up there. Then it starts to drop a little bit, right? You go. I mean, it's hard to stay at the level of a Hard Target. I mean, get John Woo in there, and you can't sleep on Wilford Brimley either, right? But you notice there's a bit of the drop really comes with Street Fighter. And I mean, he must have thought, okay, this is going to be a big franchise kind of thing. It could set me up for a while. And it's just that period in the 90s where just we can't seem to make video game movies, right? I mean, Street Fighter wasn't the only one. Double Dragon didn't turn out that well. Super Mario Brothers didn't turn. So for whatever reason, we just we didn't know how to make video game movies back then. We couldn't do it. And so the result is that this, Street Fighter movie, it kind of got hung on Van Damme. You get a little bit of a last gasp there with Sudden Death, which I think also Sudden Death was one that people didn't always consider as greatly. I love Sudden Death. Of course, I'm a huge hockey fan. Also, always a fan of actors that have plural first names. So Powers Booth, Wings Hauser. So if you got a Powers Booth in there, I'm always a fan of that. But yeah, you see it start to fade. I remember 97's Double Team. I took a date to see Double Team when I was, last year, senior year of high school. And when I was watching Double Team in the theater, there was definitely a feeling of this is not the Van Damme that that my friends and I watched on sleepovers in the early 90s, right? That this star had faded a bit. And kind of interesting because it kind of dovetails the same with Seagal. Was interesting, though, between those two, right? Between Seagal and Van Damme, right? Is that Van Damme tries to manufacture his own big screen return with Universal Soldier: The Return, right, in 1999. Whereas Seagal, right, has Exit Wounds that was a surprise hit in the theater. And so it was still a hit, right? Even though it was a surprise, it was a hit. Whereas Van Damme never had that second hit when he was trying to sort of hang on at the end there and was headed to, the old DTV world, which, again, they both kind of ended up in that DTV realm that, we love so much, right? That where all of us got to see them first. And so, going back to this Kickboxer period, again, 1989, I'm like 10, 11 years old, 89, 90. When we had sleepovers, this was the kind of movie that you would rent. You would go to the video store, and you were looking for a Kickboxer, you were looking for a Bloodsport, looking for Showdown in Little Tokyo, right? With Seagal, that might have been our favorite, right? We loved that one, and you'd load up on pizza and soda, and you'd all just get together and you'd watch it and you'd root for Van Damme and yell. I mean, I remember one of my friends, when he had his birthday party, we rented Death Warrant, and I remember when Sandman, Patrick Kilpatrick, gets thrown into the furnace, and then he comes out and he's on fire, and he kind of starts rolling around. My buddy was like, "Oh, look at that! Stop, drop, and roll. He knows how to do it." Because of course in school, right? Smokey the Bear was telling us all to stop, drop, and roll if we got set on fire. So, in that sense, I think, these movies have that sort of that nostalgia feel to them. They all have that really great feel. And it is kind of one of those things where, like, as we got older and Van Damme's star starts to fade, right? It's one of those things where the newer films maybe don't have the shine, but these old ones still had that nostalgia factor that kept us wanting to watch them, again. And this one feels really squarely right in there, Kickboxer. It was one of those ones, I mean, it had everything, right? It has a really great baddie in Tong Po. Van Damme is great. The Stan Bush soundtrack is just absolutely fantastic. It's got the dance scene where he's wearing a thong tank top, which, I didn't even know how you get something like that, and I guess you got to really have those back muscles, right, to be able to pull off a thong tank top, right, because it's got to fit right in between those back muscles. All of it just works there, and this just kind of, I almost kind of felt like I was in my my Thundercat sleeping bag, as a 10-year-old watching this movie with my friends. When I was watching this again for the site, and that was kind of a really fun thing. As a movie, right, as a plot, it's pretty generic, right? Van Damme plays the younger brother of Dennis Alexio. Dennis Alexio's character, right, is Eric Sloan. He's a big-time kickboxer who gets challenged to go to Thailand, and of course he fights Michel Kisi's Tong Po. Of course he gets paralyzed. They have to try to explain Van Damme's accent. So the idea is that as siblings, they were split up as siblings, and Van Damme was raised by their mother in Europe, and Alexio was raised by their father in America. To be honest, it's funny, they always had to come up with these reasons why Van Damme had an accent. I don't really care. It would have been fine if they were just brothers and one had an accent and one didn't, But, back then it was like one of those things you had to explain it. So the brother gets beaten up really badly and paralyzed by Tong Po, and Van Damme wants revenge, so he trains with Dennis Chan, and we get some really great training montages and out in the wilderness in Thailand. And, then Tong Po and his gang do some really baddie stuff. Some of it's a little bit much. I mean, I don't think that the woman, Mai Li, played by Rochelle Ashana, I don't think her character needed to be raped, even if they didn't show it on screen. We didn't need that. But that was the thing with 90s action, right? 80s and 90s action. Rape seemed to not be a big deal in those movies, and they would use it a lot as like a revenge tactic and things like that. So it was not necessary. Fortunately, they set up that you think you might get some dog killing, but fortunately, no, the dog survives, which was good. So they couldn't go that bad, right? Rape, okay, but dog killing, no, we're not going to go dog killing, right? It's got all those kinds of things. But overall, this is a fun one, right? This is that classic, late 80s Van Damme actioner that he's known for, and it's just a lot of fun and really works on that level. So, when I'm thinking about Van Damme and where he was at this time, right, there's a sense that, like, this is never going to end when you're that age and you're watching this, right? And it's a kind of a crazy thing to think that by the time I'm in high school in 97, right? So this is again, 89, 90. So, 7 years, I guess when you're a kid, right? When you're a kid, you're going from, 10 to 17 or 18. That feels like eternity, right? When you're young, when you're older, of course, 7 years flies by. But I would have to say for him, right, for Van Damme, it would have also flown by because he wasn't 10. He was in his late 20s, going into his late 30s. It did go by quickly, and it went by quickly for Seagal as well. It's a fascinating thing that we think of the 90s and we think of these guys as being this big thing that existed for so long. Seagal was doing direct-to-video with The Patriot in 98, and then again, Exit Wound comes out in 01. He has that kind of last gasp where Exit Wounds is a surprise hit, and then he goes back and does Half Past Dead in 02. And tries to regain or recapture that magic from Exit Wounds, but as we know, right, this is a rule. I think when you're making movies, DMX is always better than Ja Rule. That's just no offense to Ja Rule. Ja Rule is great too, but he's no DMX, and so so that's a rule that I think you can always follow. Of course, fortunately DMX is no longer with us, but that's when you're making movies, and it is interesting. I think obviously Van Damme and Seagal didn't like each other. But the two always have seemed to kind of dovetail for me because, again, the way their careers, kind of grew and arced and fell off. One of the interesting things about Van Damme, though, is that with Van Damme, you get JCVD, right, in 2008, which is just an amazing film where he's kind of just coming to terms with the fact that, that the wave is crested, right? I mean, he has a scene where he's doing a big one take and he's like, I'm 50 years old. I can't do these one takes anymore, And of course, now he's 60. He's over 60. So, but, he's coming to terms with his age. And then we get Expendables 2 in 2012. And he even I don't know if it was JCVD that he mentions about how he didn't like the part that Seagal or that Stallone wanted for him. So that's why he skipped Expendables. But then he sees how great Expendables is, and he gets in there as the villain and completely steals the film. And I think that's the kind of thing that you get from Van Damme that you wouldn't get from Seagal, right? Seagal is not going to embrace getting older, right? He's going to paint that chia, the chia pet goatee as much as he can, and try to just fight that age thing as much as he can, and play these characters that are born in the 70s when we know he was born in the 50s. Van Damme did a little bit of that, but now he's playing this older person in a lot of films, and he's embracing his aging. You look at Bouncer, you look at one of the more recent one, The Last Mercenary, right, where he's he's a father, he's getting older, but he also wants to show off that he's still in shape, right? He wants to show off that he still has it. And you come back, and it's been a long time since Bloodsport's one that I'll watch from time to time, but for the most part, I don't always come back to Van Damme like I should, to these ones like Kickboxer. And it is kind of fun to come back and just see where Van Damme was at that time and where we saw him at that time. That he was a big star. He was a rising star in 89, 90. But he was big, right? He was, with Kickboxer, I don't remember. I mean, I didn't see Kickboxer in the theater. I would have been, 10, 11 when that came out. But it was definitely one that we rented a lot. I don't remember. I didn't see Death Warrant in the theater. I'm trying to think which ones were the ones I saw in the theater of his. I just mentioned Double Team, right? I definitely saw that one in the theater. But, I want to say Hard Target. I think I may have seen Hard Target in the theater. Time Cop. A few of those. Double Impact, I'm pretty sure I saw in the theater. So, you get to that point where, he's it, right? He's a big deal. But I think, actually Street Fighter. I saw Street Fighter in the theater too. So, so thinking about when the wave crests for him, it's interesting. We're kind of seeing it now with guys like The Rock. Like The Rock's films aren't doing as big as they were, and now he's kind of coming back to the Fast and Furious series. It's interesting. I mean, you don't see many like Tom Cruise. He's kind of had the ebbs and kind of come, able to bring it back, right? With with a hit with the second Top Gun movie and all that. But he's had his moments, right, where he's kind of come and gone. So, in his way, he's actually weathered it some. Whereas Van Damme, right, he of course has never come back to the heights that he had in that late 80s, early 90s period. And it seems like I don't want to say he's come to terms with it, but the way he's transitioned now, I think is definitely a little bit better maybe than some. And I can definitely appreciate that. But, coming back to this, I have to kind of bring my brain back to that period of like, oh, I was a kid once and I thought Van Damme was the coolest thing ever, thought that Seagal was the coolest thing ever, loved Dolph Lundgren, Schwarzenegger, right? All those guys. We just, wanted to see whatever their newest movie was. We had to go see it in the theater and or rent it, right? Rent it for our sleepovers. And, watching this again and having it come back to me like that was just really fantastic. The movie is available on Tubi here in the U.S., so you can watch it for free. I think there are a lot of other streamers that have it as well, so it's not just Tubi. I'm always pushing Tubi, right, because I like it. Plex has it. Yeah, Prime Video has it if you've got Prime. So yeah, it looks like it's kind of everywhere. So it's definitely worth checking out. I think it's a fun movie. Yes, the rape scene aside, I think we could have gone without that for sure. But with beyond that, I think everything else about the movie is just fun. The dog getting stabbed, but at least the dog survives, right? The rape scene was just a little bit much. But everything else, the Tong Po baddie is absolutely fantastic, and you see Van Damme. You're kind of building up to this really great fight at the end. And I think when we get into the two reboots, I think that's going to be an interesting thing is that there's sort of a more organic feel in this film with Tong Po as the baddie and the inevitability of the fight that Van Damme's going to have with him. because it comes across a little bit more organically, despite the fact that the film is pretty paint by numbers, it just all kind of works on a different level. And I was thinking about that with Van Damme's films in this period. A lot of them have a great baddie, right? You got Bolo Young in Lionheart, or sorry, not Lionheart, Bloodsport. You've also got Bolo Young in Double Impact. Dolph, right, in Universal Soldier. So, a lot of really great baddies. Lance Henriksen in Hard Target. So, because you get these really great baddies, it really is a great juxtaposition with Van Damme as the hero. And it's kind of the opposite, right? When you think of like Seagal, like you think of Under Siege, right? Where you get Tommy Lee Jones and Gary Busey as these actually kind of more fun baddies, right? They almost kind of steal the show from Seagal. These baddies don't steal the show. These are just really despicable people that we want to see Van Damme take down. And there's almost like you want to cheer, right? With the crowd when he starts to turn the tables and he's doing his roundhouse kicks and he's like kind of doing his punches and he's like nah when he hits them and stuff like that. You're like let's get him, get that Tong Po. It's just it just kind of all works on that level. And I think it's one of those things too where the nostalgia factor is another big piece of it, but I don't know. I just I had a lot of fun watching this again. I remember the last time I've seen it. It's been a while since the last time I'd seen it, and I think now that I'm getting older, I'm in my 40s now. That being able to come back to one of these and see it, it's just a lot of fun. A few other things about it is co-written by Van Damme. He wrote it with Mark DeSalle. I don't know, if there's any stories or anything about him writing it, but, I don't know if he was the one who felt like he had to write in the fact that he and his brother were split up and he grew up in Europe. They were always kind of trying to find a way to do that, right? Find a way to explain his accent. And so this was one of the sillier ones, I guess. I don't know. It's just, I don't know what else to say other than just this was just a fun time that I really enjoyed it. But I think, as we get into the other Kickboxer films, right, as we start looking at two from here, of course, Van Damme leaves the series, right? He's done, and then he kind of comes back for these reboots, but he's not there for 2, 3, 4, or 5. And this is a common thing for Van Damme, right? His Bloodsport movies also have sequels that he's not a part of, and so you've got that in there as well. Time Cop has a sequel, right, that he's not there for. I'm trying to think of Cyborg, right? Cyborg had sequels that he wasn't there for. No Retreat, No Surrender had sequels that he wasn't there for. So a lot of his films, Hard Target now, right, I guess you could say, right, because it's got the Hard Target 2 with Scott Adkins. Sudden Death ends up having a sequel now with, what's his name, Michael Jai White. So, we can kind of keep going with that, but it is an interesting thing. Only really like later did he come back. Like he came back and did his Universal Soldier sequels, and then he's come back and done a couple of reboots for Kickboxer. But for the most part, his movies had sequels without him, right? Where they brought in new people. And so it's going to be interesting as we pivot this from Van Damme to Sasha Mitchell. Because I think this is one of the things, right, that as a kid, I kind of just took for granted, right, that Van Damme wouldn't be in his sequels, right? These sequels, and I kind of also took for granted as a kid that there were these sort of direct-to-video sequels that would be in video stores that would get us to try to keep, watching them. So whether it was, Kickboxer sequels or Bloodsport, where they had Daniel Bernhardt, you kind of just understood that this was kind of, the way it worked, that series had these direct video sequels. I think the one that I refuse to watch, right, is the Roadhouse one, which everybody tells me I should. Maybe I will because it's got Richard Norton in it. Maybe at some point I finally will watch it. But it's going to be interesting as we sort of pivot here. And I think we've got some backstory on why Van Damme might not have been in part 2. So that's another piece of it. And I don't know, maybe if they had gotten him attached to part 2, maybe it's not a direct-to-video film. It would have been an interesting movie with him in it. So as we pivot and we talk about that one a little bit, it'll be interesting to see. But as I wrap up this piece here, as I wrap up this conversation here, because we're going to lose Van Damme, right? We lose Van Damme for the next 3 movies or next 4 movies, right? 2 through 5, we're going to lose Van Damme, and we won't come back to him until we reboot them. So leaving here in 1989. There was a sense that Van Damme was going to be there for the long haul. But there was also a sense too, I guess, when you think about it, that there was a little bit of hokiness to what he was doing, right? Between the splits, right, and the bare butt cheeks and all of that, that he was kind of maybe a little full of himself. He was a little bit much, and that maybe there would be a point where it would all sort of start to turn, right? That that just kind of was the reality of it. Maybe as a kid, I just wouldn't have been able to see that, right? That as I got older in high school and wasn't as big of a fan. I mean, the only reason why I watched Double Team was actually I was a huge Dennis Rodman fan. I thought it would be hilarious to see him in that movie, which it was. He was fantastic. That was why I saw Double Team. But yeah, it's one of those interesting things that you kind of go away from. You kind of start to see those cracks in the facade, right? And not that as a kid that I thought the bare butt cheek stuff was great either, or the splits or all of that stuff, but it wasn't like something that I was like, that I thought was like, oh, come on, get over yourself. This is ridiculous. That, as I got older, right, you definitely saw, and we all kind of, see as a joke. And it is kind of funny, too, to see that he's come back to some of that stuff. With his movies, Pound of Flesh, right? It was a direct-to-video film that he made. It was a longer movie. I think it was like a hour and 45 minutes, something like that. That one had him, showing off his bare butt cheeks again. Also, it has a scene of him doing a split. His character was born in the 70s, so his character is about 15 years younger, I think, than he is in real life. So he was kind of, trying to bring back that kind of thing a little bit and show that he could still do all of that stuff. So he does, a little bit of that. Kill 'Em All had a little bit of that, but Kill 'Em All was a little bit more. I think, again, he was playing somebody who was younger still, right? He was trying to play somebody younger. But when we get into The Bouncer, now we get someone who's really, really understands where he's at, what his place is. I was there with the Kickboxer films as well. He kind of says, okay, I'm going to be this older, wise guy. He's essentially playing the Dennis Chan character. And so in that sense, I think he embraces getting older a little bit at that point. But yeah, I don't know. I think kind of sitting here and just waiting for it and saying like, okay, this is where we're at here. We're leaving Van Damme as a rising star in 1989 and going into Kickboxer 2, where he is too good or too big for the Kickboxer films. And then, and we'll see him again in a couple episodes when we get to the reboots. But yeah, what we'll do now is we'll just take a quick break, and then we will come back with Kickboxer 2.
Hey everyone, we'll get back to the podcast in a second, but first I have a new novel out, Holtman Arms. It follows Colvin Hall, an aspiring writer who decides to write a romance novel on a whim, sends it to a publisher, and it becomes a huge success. The only problem is, no one knows it's him because he writes under the pen name Mary Ballantyne. With all of the money and none of the fame, Colvin longs for the world to recognize his accomplishments. When he gets an opportunity to write a freelance article on a washed-up 90s pop star looking for a comeback, that recognition starts to come, but is it all he hoped for? It doesn't matter because he's getting it whether he likes it or not. Holtman Arms is the second in my author's cycle after A Girl and a Gun, and like that previous novel, it explores themes of success and accomplishment in the 21st century. You can buy it now through Amazon in paperback or on Kindle. The link is in the podcast description. As always, thanks for your support.
All right, we are back, and we are looking at Kickboxer 2, The Road Back. So, before we get into it, we'll kind of talk about why Van Damme's not in this film. And there's sort of two competing theories or two explanations. So, in the IMDb trivia, it says that Van Damme turned down Kickboxer 2, The Road Back because he was doing Double Impact instead, right? So that was the reason, which again, Double Impact was a bigger budget film. Though I don't know if this had Van Damme, maybe it would have also been, in the theaters, big budget kind of film along the same lines as a Double Impact or as Kickboxer. So that's the one explanation, right? And that's there in the IMDb trivia. The other explanation Kenner kind of gave me on Movies in the Attic is that really it was more just the issues that Van Damme had with Pyun, because Albert Pyun was tapped to direct this, and Van Damme didn't want to work with him. Now, I don't know. I mean, part of me thinks like if they really wanted Van Damme, they would have had somebody else direct it. If it really wouldn't have worked out between Pyun and Van Damme. That's my feeling. it was contentious between the two of them and Cyborg, so that's really where the issues come in, is with Cyborg. So, just to give you a sense of what happened there with Cyborg there and Albert Pyun, Albert Pyun was making the film for Canon, and with Van Damme. Van Damme didn't like the direction the film was going in, so he took the prints and they kind of re-edited the film, edited it differently, but he wanted reshoots. He demanded reshoots. It was in those reshoots, right, that he demanded that Albert Pyun took the equipment for those reshoots and made the movie Deceit. So he actually, at night, when they weren't shooting the Cyborg reshoots, he was using that footage or that equipment to shoot Deceit. And so if you watch Deceit, he thanks Van Damme at the end. He's like, thank you to Jean-Claude Van Damme, without whom this film wouldn't have been possible. And I remember seeing that credit in Deceit, and I posted it on the blog, mentioned it. Some people kind of commented. I think, I think. I was trying to think of who. I know Simon from Explosive Action, I think, was one who was like, hey, that's kind of cool if Van Damme helped him, with making that movie. That's kind of a cool thing. And Albert Pyun got into the comment section and said, no, it wasn't that he helped me. He, demanded these reshoots that I didn't really want to do, so I wanted to, I took the equipment that they were using for these reshoots, and I made my own movie with it. So it's kind of an FU movie there with Deceit. But anyway, no love lost kind of between those two. I think when Pyun did pass away, I think Van Damme did have some really nice words for him. But at that time, right, late 80s, right, it wouldn't have been a good situation between those two. But again, I think if they really thought they were going to get Van Damme, I think they would have just had somebody else direct it. I think that's just my take on it. Again, it's not like that Albert Pyun wasn't big enough at that time, but if you look at, great, he just had Cyborg come out, and Cyborg did well enough, right? He does Captain America, which doesn't do as well as I think they were hoping for, and I think he was probably still had some of the shine on him from Sword and Sorcerer, which did do really well, and so. So it's possible maybe that they were wedded to Albert Pyun, and it was a matter of whether it was Pyun or Van Damme. But I don't know. I kind of think if Van Damme had insisted, I want another director, they probably would have gone in a different direction than Albert Pyun. And I think really it was probably the double impact part of it that he didn't want to make a sequel, and so we end up with Sasha Mitchell, who I think Sasha Mitchell is good in this part. So to give you a sense of what the story is, Sasha Mitchell is the third brother that we didn't know existed out of the Sloan brothers, which is interesting, right? Because it's actually kind of a Fast and Furious thing, right? It's almost like you wonder if Vin Diesel stole this idea when he wanted to shoehorn in a third sibling with Fast 9 or F9. I kept calling it Fast 9, but F9, when he brought in the Jacob character, right, played by John Cena. I wonder if he thought of this, maybe he got the idea. It's like he's watching Kickboxer 2. He's like, hey, that's a good idea. I could just get another sibling. We'll just throw in another sibling, another Toretto sibling. That's perfect. But anyway, he's David Sloan, the youngest of the three Sloan kickboxing brothers. He is running the gym that the other two brothers set up. Now, these other two brothers are dead. They've been killed by Tong Po, we assume. And so Sasha Mitchell is trying to run this gym and sort of like be like a safe haven for kids, right? He's letting kids come in and he's kind of trying to help them out. He's supported in this endeavor by John Deal, right, who you may remember as Zito from Miami Vice, right? So you had am I getting the name? Because I know his partner was Switek, right? But I'm hoping I'm getting the name right for his character in Miami Vice. I'm a huge Miami Vice fan, and if I can't remember that it's Zito and Switek, but I'm probably getting that name wrong because that doesn't sound right. Anyway, but I mean, he was, if you remember on Miami Vice, right, when they would have the main stories that would be, Sonny and you'd have them doing their kind of the main show, Tubbs and Crockett doing their, whatever, like investigating somebody like, Phil the Shill, or whoever. You'd have these secondary ones. And so, yeah, Zito, it was Zito. I was right. I don't know. At my age, I just don't always trust my memory. And so I always get names mixed up anyway. I think that's like a New England thing, getting names mixed up. You just get the name wrong. It's kind of also kind of Archie Bunkerish when you hear me do it sometimes. Of course, we know that there's the podcast where I called Paul Walker Scott Walker the whole time, so I'm never great with names. But anyway, so Zito and Switek, they would be doing like these little undercover things, like maybe like trying to bust a bookie or prostitution ring, while Crockett and Tubbs were out doing the really fancy one, right? Driving the like Zito and Switek would be in the van, right? While Crockett and Tubbs were driving the Ferrari. That was kind of what you had there, anyway. But so yeah, it was great to see John Deal in something anyway. So John Deal's helping him run the kickboxing gym, and then you've got Peter Boyle, right? If you remember, I mean, Taxi Driver, all kinds of great stuff. Of course, what was the oh my God, now I'm drawing a blank at the TV show that he did, the Raymond. Everybody Loves Raymond. Anyway, so you played the dad on that. He was great there as well. So you gotta love Peter Boyle, right? Seeing Peter Boyle in a movie. He runs this this new kickboxing federation that he wants to get David Sloan. He wants a name like David Sloan to help drive the interest in the kickboxing federation. And while Sasha Mitchell's not interested, his prize pupil, Vince Murdocco of PM fame, right, who we all love, he convinces him to join. And the thing is, right, he has a nefarious backer in Kerry Hiroyuki Tagawa. So Kerry Tagawa is there. He's got some nefarious motives, and Peter Boyle has a champion at the time. It's Matthias Hughes, and so Sasha Mitchell, in trying to get some money for the gym, decides to have an exhibition where he beats up Matthias Hughes and takes him down and gets the belt and whatever. And so at the same time, Peter Boyle and Tagawa are trying to kind of, Peter Boyle is trying to get Sloan in, whereas Tagawa has ulterior motives. Those arterial motives is that he wants to get a rematch for Tong Po, because Tong Po screwed up his rematch with Kurt Sloan by killing him, I guess, apparently, and they show that scene. So that's the deal. Tagawa is trying to bring that in. So some other stuff happens. Dojo gets burned down by Tagawa's men. A young boy who's living at the dojo dies. So another great piece here, right? We get rape in the first film. Now we get a kid dying in a fire in this one. So a lot of really fun, uplifting stuff that we get in these films. Though, to be honest, like Albert Pyun sometimes would do that kind of more serious stuff that, you'd kind of leave you wondering, like, if it was really necessary. But yeah, so we have that. We have Dennis Chan is back. He flies out to L.A. so he can help train another Sloan brother, not knowing that the Sloan brother is going to be training to fight Tong Po. We find out that it's Tong Po. I mean, we kind of know that Tong Po is coming, right? We have a sense, but it doesn't really happen until Vince Murdocco is scheduled to fight the champion of Peter Boyle's kickboxing league, and Kerry Tagawa sets up a little bait and switch with that, and has that champion be ill, and Tong Po shows up, and of course Tong Po is not somebody you want to fight with. Similar to Kickboxer 1, right, where Eric Sloan doesn't listen to Kurt telling him, hey, stop fighting this guy, he's going to kill you or break your back or whatever. Murdocco, of course, doesn't listen to Sasha Mitchell, who's telling him, hey, don't fight this guy. And multiple times that he could have thrown in the towel, but nope, he's just got to get up and take some more elbows to the face. Another great thing is we have Gene LaBelle as the referee in this. So if you remember Gene LaBelle, the story with him is that he supposedly, or he says that he put Steven Seagal in a rear naked choke and caused him to pass out, and he crapped himself. That's I don't know. That's supposed to be a really good. Supposed to have happened. So supposedly the way it worked, I think I've seen this on a few different things. So apparently, what it was that Seagal said that. Seagal said that like he could get out of any chokehold. He had the ability to get out of any chokehold. The Bell's like, okay, let's try it. Let's see what you do. And I guess his way to get out of the chokehold is to punch somebody in the nuts. And of course, he just kind of sort of shook it off and choked him out. Now, LaBelle, the other thing I've seen with the trivia is that he also choked him out because Seagal was being bad to the stuntman, which I've heard that Seagal is bad to stuntmen. He's not good when you're working in stunt movies with him. He's known for breaking bones, for causing injuries, and LaBelle may have taken exception for that. And Seagal tried to attack LaBelle, and LaBelle got him into a chokehold and just whatever it was, he choked him until he was unconscious, and he crapped his pants. So we get Gene LaBelle in here. Gene LaBelle's character plays the referee. He does a horrible job refereeing the fight between Tong Po and Vince Murdocco. Vince Brodacco just keeps elbowing him in the. I mean, sorry, Tong Po keeps elbowing him in the face. Which kickboxing elbowing is not legal, right? It's legal in Muay Thai, but it's not in kickboxing. And LaBelle's just like, oh, you can't do that. You can't elbow him. And Tong Po's like, well, I'm just gonna elbow him again anyway. It's like, no, you should have called the fight. The second time he does it, right? He does it one time, you ward him. The next time it's over, you lose the fight. But that never happens. He just kind of lets him get in there and take a beating and get killed. So that was Gene LaBelle's part in the film. We also had Dale Jacoby as a judge for the fight, and then Benny the Jet Urquidez, he was doing the fight choreography in this. So we get some great names like that in here, and I mean that's one thing that Pyun's good about, right? Is he gets some he always gets some good fighters when he makes some of these films. And so that part of it I did appreciate. And, of course, the other thing with Pyun is you get our Pyun mainstays. Our one Pyun mainstay we get in this is Vincent Klin. So, of course, from Cyborg, he's back. He's referred to as Thai Thug in this, but he's essentially Kerry Tagawa's hard man, but he doesn't really do anything, except he just kind of shows up a little bit here or there. He doesn't really do much. So nothing as fun as Back Off War Child, seriously. But still always great to see Vince and Klin. But yeah, so similar to the Kickboxer one, we get a build up, and so I will say the fight at the end between Tong Po and Sasha Mitchell is a really good fight, but it comes on really suddenly. It's just kind of like Tong Po has just killed Vince Brodacco, right? It's official. He's flatlined. And Tagawa comes over and is like, hey, you want your revenge? Couple hours, come back here and fight Tong Po. It's like, okay, that works out. And of course, Tong Po, apparently, he's happy to fight again after just 2 hours of taking a break. I don't know. And of course, they do the classic, shards of glass kind of fight thing there. Yeah, and I mean, it's still good. I mean, Sasha Mitchell is good, I think, in this part. I mean, he's not big screen draw good, right? And of course, this film does suffer by it not being Van Damme and by it being Sasha Mitchell. I mean, Sasha Mitchell wasn't much of a name at that time. He hadn't done Step by Step yet. And so I think the movie it grossed 1.2 million worldwide, which isn't horrible for 1990, but I don't know what the budget was, and I think for a Kickboxer sequel, they would have wanted a little bit more than that. And, I don't know, too, I know with Sasha Mitchell, so, if you look in his IMDb bio, while he was doing Step by Step, so one of the interesting things, when you watch the movie, you notice that he has a wedding ring on his left hand in some of the scenes. I think continuity-wise, I think that was supposed to have been removed, but it wasn't in all of them. He was already married at this point, so he was born in the late 60s, and so in the early 20s, he was already married. And there were issues that he had with his wife. His side of the story is that she was drunk and was abusing their kids, and he was stepping in, and that was how he sort of was arrested for spousal abuse, was that rather he was stepping in for his kids. But anyway, I think what happens is with the movie the TV show Step by Step, while he was shooting that show, he missed some court-ordered marriage counseling he was supposed to attend, and he gets thrown off of that show. But at this time, it's before he's even doing Step by Step, so he hasn't even done that show yet. And so he wasn't really enough of a name to really draw a film like this, but he's really good. I mean, I really like him in this. I think he does a great job. Of course, again, I knew him as Cody. I mean, I didn't see this when it came out, so I should be clear about this. I did not see this in the early 90s when it came out. It was after the fact, after I had seen him in Step by Step. That was when I first started seeing him here. And so immediately was like, oh, it's Cody from Step by Step. What is he doing? And of course he plays like a kind of a beach bum, kind of like a righteous dude, kind of like a Keanu Reeves-ish kind of character. Keanu Reeves in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure kind of character. And so yeah, it was almost kind of a surprise for me to see him as that. What were the years for Step by Step? It was like 91 to 98. So actually, he was just getting into being on Step by Step. I kind of forget that show was earlier 90s too. Like I kind of forget myself. I kind of think that these things happen later on than they do. My memory thinks like there's no way I can remember those things that well from being that long ago, but I'm older than I think I am. I think that's probably what it is. But so right around the time that he's doing this, he's doing Step by Step. And so I guess, it was kind of the late 90s where he ran into that legal trouble and he was lost from that. But but at this time, he hasn't done Step by Step yet. And It's interesting because he is doing the other Kickboxer sequels at the same time that he's doing Step by Step, and I just didn't I didn't I found them after which I say I found them after the fact. I guess he was still doing Step by Step in the late '90s. Looks like '98 he was still doing this, and I would have found like Kickboxer. Part of me thinks like maybe it was later. Maybe it was like the early 2000s that I found them. I mean, Kickboxer 4, I remember, I think I found that one on like Spike TV or something like that. So if that's the case, right, because Spike TV would have still been the Nashville network in the 90s. So it would have taken a little bit of time before it turns into Spike and then start showing movies like this, right? So at the time that the movies were coming out, right, it was still the Nashville network showing like reruns of Hee Haw and Dukes of Hazzard and stuff like that. So I guess it's a little different. I think they would do their own country music videos, stuff like that as well. But yeah, so anyway, so I think he's good though. I like him here. I like the cast. You have a more robust cast here than you did in the previous film, which is interesting. Right? You had a big budget film that didn't have as many names. I mean, this again, you look at the names in here. And again, Peter Boyle, great name. Cary Tagawa, which Pyun does a great job here. Pyun is known, I think, the other movie I can think of is Brain Smasher Love Story, where he does this, where he pokes fun at the trope of, a person of one Asian descent playing another Asian ethnicity, right? And so Cary Tagawa, who of course is of Japanese descent, is playing someone of Thai descent in the film. And there's a scene where Murdako says something about like, you guys make great electronics, and he's like, no, you've got me confused with the Japanese. He does a similar joke in Brain Smasher Love Story. I can't remember exactly how the joke went, but it was like because there were Chinese characters that were playing Japanese, and they were like ninjas, and he's like, you can't have Chinese ninjas or something like that. And so so he does that. He'll make those jokes, which I think is always great. So he does that here. It sneaks in a joke there. But either way, Cary Tagawa is great as a baddie, right? He's always going to be a great baddie, and I think Tong Po, of course, is still that imposing figure, and waiting to see the showdown between those two at the end is really great. So all of that kind of stuff just works there. I think again from a story standpoint, this is pretty paint by numbers. And I don't know if Van Damme was attached to it, what kind of story we would have gotten. I don't know if it would have been the same. I mean, you've got to think, right, that probably Van Damme is going to be asking for rewrites. He's known for that kind of thing. He probably would have wanted something more complicated, something longer. I mean, a nice hour and a half really works here. I thought Dennis Chan does a great job as kind of being more affable, or being kind of sillier in some ways, but he was kind of more fun to have there, and I like seeing him interact with California and interacting with Sasha Mitchell's character. So that was all really good. Interesting piece too is that we get Brian Austin Green in this, and so always great to have a little bit of a. Always great to have a little 90210 connection in a movie, and this is a young Brian Austin Green, which I had never realized how young he would have been compared to like say what it was Sasha Mitchell. I was thinking maybe Sasha Mitchell, because you see the two of them on screen and you think like, oh wow, he's way younger than Sasha Mitchell, but they're about 7 years apart, 6 or 7 years apart, and really it's more Sasha Mitchell just seems older, right? He seems like he's closer to Van Damme's age than he really is. He's born in the late 60s. He feels like, and maybe it's because at that point, I mean, I think he already had kids at that point, and so maybe that's what it was that he by already having kids. Having kids ages you. I know for myself, my wife and I didn't have any kids, and we both look younger than my friends who do have kids. It's just one of those realities, right? That that's what happens when you do it. So that might have been part of it. Is he just looked older at that time than he really was. So anyway, so you have that piece there, the little 90210. Nod, and it was kind of cool to see that. And again, at the same time, he would have just been getting started on 90210, and so again, I don't think you would see Brian Austin Green in this like tiny part in a movie like this a year later, right? 1 year after that this is made. You're not going to catch him in something like that. You might see him in it now, but at that time, yeah, right, you weren't probably going to see him in that. I was thinking we might have had another connection to 90210 in the previous in Kickboxer, but I don't think so. I think it was just Brian Austin Green in part 2, but it was still kind of fun to see that. My favorite Brian Austin Green line from 90210 is when he's in the inner city in LA, and he's showing a young African American male, that he knows how to, that he knows how to DJ. And the kid says to him, like, man, you do pretty good for a white boy. And he says, hey, I might be white, but I'm not vanilla. And best line, one of the best lines ever. But anyway, so, getting back to the Kickboxer 2, I think it's, I don't know, again, this does not have the kind of nostalgia factor at all, right, that the first movie has. This was not, like I said, I didn't see it when it came out. This was not a movie that we watched in sleepovers. This was the kind of thing that, like, I'm not saying that that this was one that was rented like this, but this is the kind of thing that, like, maybe if you asked your mom or your dad, like when they went to the video store, like, oh, can you get me something? Yeah, get me Kickboxer. They'd come home with Kickboxer 2, and you'd be like, what? Oh, come on, mom. And they'd be like, well, what's the difference? Just like going back to the DC conversation, right? Like you want Green Lantern, your mom brings home Green Arrow, and you're like, oh, come on, mom. It's like, well, what's the difference? Then of course they end up making a TV show about the Green Arrow. They just call it an Arrow. It ends up being really good. I never would have thought that you could do that kind of really fun stuff with Green Arrow, because again, it was such a disappointment if you got Green Arrow instead of Green Lantern. Kind of the same thing, right? That you'd bring one of these home and be like, oh man, no, I wanted Kickboxer, not Kickboxer 2. This doesn't even have Van Damme in it, But anyway, so. As I got older, of course, I got a kick out of watching these on cable TV or renting them with our friends and watching them after the fact. But, I think there are some things that Albert Pyun brings to the table here that does make this a little bit stronger than, your usual DTV sequel. And I think when we get into part 4, it's going to be interesting because I haven't seen part 4 yet. Again, I watched it, of course, well back when I reviewed it for the blog, but I haven't seen it again yet for this series. So it'll be interesting to see if that one holds up, because I always like that one better than the other ones. So we'll see when we get into that one, kind of how that one goes. But, it's an interesting, because these aren't, they do try to tie in like a cohesive storyline, right? They try to make this one follow the previous one in the way that, like, he's this other brother, that Tong Po has wiped out his family, that, he has no brothers left. They've all been killed by Tong Po. But that, like, it kind of follows that line of story. I almost kind of wonder if I don't know. I guess they didn't want to have him playing Van Damme's character. They did have a person playing Van Damme's character who, he was supposed to have a fight scene with Tong Po before he gets killed. And they ended up cutting that scene out, I think, because I think Pyun thought it was a better fight scene than the one that he had at the end with Sasha Mitchell, and he thought it would overshadow the film to have such a great fight scene in the middle like that. So he ends up cutting it out, so you just see Tong Po shooting him. The character's name was, the actor's name was Emmanuel Curvin, but we only really see him. It's kind of like Kevin Costner in The Big Chill, right? You just kind of see that little bit there. But yeah, so they do try to kind of carry this on, and then of course what happens is we get the next 3 films, right? Are going to have, the 2 after this, but 2, 3, and 4 are all Sasha Mitchell as David Sloan. So we're really going to get in on Sasha Mitchell here while we've lost Van Damme. We get to really get to know him. And really, this is really what he's doing at this time. So he's doing Step by Step. He had a brief piece on Dallas. He was in Dallas a little bit. There's a little bit of an overlap between Dallas and then moving on to Step by Step. And he does Class of 1992, The Substitute. So that's really what he's doing around this time, but it's mostly this kind of stuff. And then, of course, he gets removed from Step by Step, and that's when he starts doing stuff like Gangland, Luck of the Draw, some of those kinds of movies that we've reviewed on the site and we've seen him for. So, it's going to be interesting, and I don't want to cover too much of the Sasha Mitchell stuff because we're going to be talking about him more in the next couple of films. But one of the things that it looked like was going to happen was, had Albert Pyun lived, and had he been, well enough health-wise, he was looking to make a sequel to Cyborg that had Sasha Mitchell in it, and he was looking to make another Kickboxer movie, so Kickboxer Algiers. It would have been really interesting to see where that went, and we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to Kickboxer 4, kind of that legacy of Albert Pyun sort of trying to take Kickboxer and do something with it at the same time that Van Damme's trying to do something with it, and what the difference and how that could have worked, because and again, I don't want to step too much on the conversation of the reboots as well with Van Damme, but one of the things about this film is it is clearly a DTV film, even if it is made in the theater and did, gross 1.2 million. And I like what Albert Pyun, where he was going with this series. Now, he doesn't do part 3, which we'll be covering in the next episode, but he does do part 4. And of course, he doesn't do part 5, which the part 5 doesn't have Sasha Mitchell either. So, but it would have been interesting. It would have been really cool to see what he would have done. And it is kind of too bad that it never happened, that we never got that movie, because I really would have liked to see the two of them come back together and make another Kickboxer movie. And I don't know, the Kickboxer Algiers, was he playing? It just said it was pre-production. It didn't say what character. I don't think what he was playing. It didn't list it, but I would like to have think that, I don't know if he would have been able to play David Sloan, because I don't know how that works. Like, who has the rights to David Sloan as a character? Van Damme, right, was using the Kurt Sloan character, but there was no David Sloan. That's a completely made up, a completely unique one. But I guess because he's linked to Kurt Sloan, I don't know. I don't know how that would have worked. And and again, I don't know too with Van Damme, if Van Damme, like he said, if he and Pyun had come to better terms towards the end of Pyun's life, like Van Damme had said, then maybe he wouldn't have cared so much if he did that. But anyway, we never got that, unfortunately. We never got that movie, and it's too bad, because I think it would have been really cool to see what he would have done there. But yeah, I think it's time for us to wrap this up. So the next episode that we do in this series, which will be coming in 2 weeks, we'll be looking at movies 3, 4, and 5. And then we'll wrap up with looking at the 2 reboots. So look for that in a couple weeks as we get into that. But yeah, I'll kind of wrap up here with some quick plugs for me. Again, dtvconnoisseur.blogspot.com. That's the website. You can find everything there. You can find out the links to the novels. You can find out what other Albert Pyun films I've reviewed, other Sasha Mitchell films I've reviewed, other Van Damme films, right? You can just go down and look at the tags and see who I've covered there. With the podcast, you're listening to it now, of course. Subscribe on all your major podcatchers. One thing I wanted to mention that I've been forgetting to mention, and so maybe it's a good time to mention now, Stitcher is going to be sunsetted soon. So if you're following me on Stitcher, find another podcast or another podcatcher to find it through. So iTunes is the easiest one. I am on Spotify is the host. Used to be Anchor, now it's Spotify podcast. I think they would probably prefer if you subscribe to me on Spotify. That'd probably be closer to me being able to monetize the podcast if you're a Spotify listener. But I'm fine if you just do. I mean, what I love about iTunes is that I get a notification telling me when somebody's new podcast is out. So it's really great. Like, it's like, Exploding Helicopter just put out a new podcast today as I'm recording this. Really cool, right? That I could just, get a message saying, like a little notification, a little banner pops up on my phone saying, hey, check out the new Exploding Helicopter podcast. So that's why I always suggest people do iTunes. But, whatever it is, just know that Stitcher is going under probably, I think it's like mid to late August. So within the next month, it should be, they'll be sunsetting it. So if you are following us on Stitcher, yeah, I think Pandora is owned by the same company. And so I think they're rolling it into Pandora. So you might be able to subscribe there. But again, I think, iTunes or Spotify are probably your best bets. But really most other podcatchers have us as well. So, and I think I'll probably be removing the Stitcher link soon. So just keep that in mind that, you won't be able to see us on Stitcher anymore. And then again, I always got to plug my novels. I think, Holtman Arms is the most recent one. You can find that on Amazon, both Kindle and paperback. The Kindle version, $4.99, not the worst thing in the world. I always appreciate anybody buying. I get the same royalty, whether it is the Kindle version or the paperback, but I know people like the paperbacks because they're kind of all the one color. Each one's a different color, but they're one color and they kind of look nice on your shelf. And I am going to probably do the same thing for my fourth novel, Don's House in the Mountains. When I put that one out, I am going to have that one be one color as well. I'm looking to probably go on Fiverr and maybe do some covers. But hey, if you're somebody who does graphic design and you're looking to make a little extra money, you can always hit me up. And we could talk about doing covers if you want. We could find a good rate, whatever it is that you charge. Or if you're someone who's like kind of new to the game and you want to just get your name out there, and I'd still float you some money, but that's something I'm looking to do. Maybe is to upgrade my novels with new covers. So yeah, so if you're into graphic design, you want to get some work in, let me know. You can always hit me up. I'm doing a horrible job of answering my emails. But the email is dtvconnoisseur@yahoo.com. So you can always hit me up there. You can also message me Facebook. You can message me on Facebook. Twitter, which is now X. That one is a little bit interesting. You still message me on there. I'll still be able to get you, but I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that as time goes on. I've noticed, like, for example, you're not retweeting anymore, you're reposting. I don't know if they even call them tweets or they call them posts, but there's really starting to change things in there. And I've noticed the engagement starting to go down a little bit, ever so slightly. And so I think more and more people are starting to go away from X. Facebook is where I still get a lot of the engagement. But yeah, I'm kind of keeping an eye on, I'm still monitoring, but I'm still using Twitter/X for now. So yeah, you can always message me on there too, if you want to. But yeah, I think that is everything. So, again, check out the blog, and then next week we'll be back with Ty and Brett from Comeuppance. But yeah, in the meantime, thank you everybody for listening, and we'll talk soon. Bye, everyone.
Generated